Hello, welcome everyone to our Uplift HR webinar today. I'm Serap Zel, founder of Uplift, and we are a global recruitment agency focusing on mid to senior level talent search. Since 2021, we place talent in 52 different countries. So our team has gained great experience and also exposure in global talent market. Then we said, why don't we organize a webinar about this topic and invited also an experienced global talent acquisition leader into our webinar. And today I'm very excited to host Annelisa Dinwoodie. Welcome, Annelisa.
Thank you so much. Lovely to be here.
Thanks for joining us. So, Annelisa is a seasoned global TA leader and had experience in global brands such as Meta and Amazon. And now she is leading the executive recruiting at Bumble. She is based in the UK. And of course, we will talk about Elizabeth Annelisa's career background. But before we start, I want to thank to our listeners today. I know everyone has a very busy schedules, right? I mean, TA leaders, HR leaders, always very busy. But we appreciate your time to tune in us and listening us. We'll share some very interesting insights from global talent pool and markets, but hope you will leave with some useful takeaways. So we like to do these webinars interactive as much as possible. So of course, I have a big pleasure to talking to Annelisa. We have already a couple of chats before that. But if you have any questions during our chat with Annelisa, please type them here on the right-hand side on the chat box. So I'll keep an eye on the questions. We will cover them during the webinar. So, Annelisa, should we kick off our webinar maybe by listening your career journey a little bit? I know it's inspiring for many people. And also I want to ask like what inspires you be in talent acquisition field at the global scope?
Sure. So I actually looked at my LinkedIn profile yesterday to check how many years actually I had been in TA, and it's almost 14 now, which is crazy. It's gone so quickly, and I still love it. Every single day is different, which is why it's so fun being in TA. So I started off in agency, Computer Futures, like I'm sure a lot of TA professionals did. 2.5 years there. Everyone was like family. You started at 8:30 in the morning, finished 7:30 p.m. at night, 8 p.m. sometimes. Lots of cold calling, but really got to understand kind of tech in general, recruiting, how it worked. I then went into my first in-house role at Sky. I'm not sure if you've all heard of Sky Store, but it's very similar to kind of like a Netflix. So I worked on like basically building out that entire team from scratch, which was super, super fun, very, very high volume. And I actually started sitting with the team rather than the recruitment team at that point because I needed to build out 100 heads within a very short amount of time. So really built trust with the business and started loving like finding out more about them, what they wanted in their candidates. So 2.5 years at Sky. I then moved over to Amazon. Very cool experience there as well. So one of the things that I started working on was big interview events. So we would go to Poland, interview 100 people over 5 days, 20 offers, offer them the US or London. Most of them would choose the US, shock, but we would have to close them on London if the H-1B visa came back rejected. So that was an interesting challenge. I at that point started talking to different groups like Women Who Code, getting them to come in, do workshops with our engineers. Amazon teach more women to code, which was amazing. That's something that I'm very, very passionate about. And then after that, I went to Meta. So I was at Meta for almost 6 years. In London, I started working on very, very niche roles. So the first ever role was find an integration engineer who would be based out of Dubai, travel around Africa 50% of their time, work with our third-party telco partners, have the Meta coding bar, networking, etc. So very, very niche, hard to fill roles. Super fun. I also worked on Workplace, which unfortunately is no longer a thing, but all their solutions architects roles. I worked with WhatsApp, Instagram. So very, very, very amazing experience. Great people there, and lots of projects as well in the diversity space. So virtual events over COVID, which was really like a very, very good thing to work on. Learned a lot there. Yeah. I then went over to Singapore. Very, very fun again. So I built out the executive search function there because they hadn't had it before. So I was working with the enterprise engineering function of the business.
The Asia Pac region?
Exactly, the whole Asia Pac region. So we were market mapping Australia. It was majority Singapore roles, but also we had a team in Hong Kong, people in Shanghai. So yeah, the leadership function there. Unfortunately, myself and my entire team were impacted by the layoffs. So I decided the expat dream is not over, and I started having a look in Europe at different companies. And I ended up going to Polaroid, who probably most people have heard of, but most people
Yeah.
don't know that the Polaroid that you would know from back in the day, the big American corporation, actually shut and went bankrupt. So the Polaroid you now know is a small scale up based in Amsterdam, very small offices in New York, Shanghai, Hong Kong, Taiwan, as well as a couple of factories in the Netherlands and Germany. So that was really, really a very good experience because I built out the entire TA function internally from scratch. They had nothing in place before. They were just spending a fortune with agencies. So that was a very different kind of experience. And now I'm at Bumble. So I've just moved from Amsterdam back to London. And again, building out an exec search function from scratch. There's lots going on there, and it's a very exciting time. So that's just a bit of an overview.
Yeah, it's a really inspiring journey that you had, and different regions, different industries, and also different scales, the companies that you worked in. And thanks for sharing that. And actually, I would like to ask a little bit about that. I mean, I want to share also our today's agenda, a couple of points that we'll cover today. But the first one, I would like to ask your experience from, especially like moving from like big scale company to startup or scaled up company. And I know there are many people are shifting from either startup to scale up or really global company to startup. So what challenges or adjustments come with moving from one to another? So also maybe you have seen some successful transitions between these two different landscapes. So I would love to hear about that.
Yeah, so I obviously did this myself from like a Meta to a Polaroid. It was a very, very interesting transition. There's a lot of things that I learned and could have done a bit differently. But I would say that anyone thinking of making this journey, there are a lot of positives if you can get a job within a scale up or startup. Firstly, actually, when the layoffs happened at Meta, a lot of startups and scale ups were very hesitant to consider me because of my big tech experience. So if you do manage to get it, what it will mean is if you have worked in a scale up as well as big tech, is you are now eligible for a startup, scale up, big tech. Any kind of company in the world now will probably be interested in your profile, and there won't be any hesitation around, oh, will they be able to understand like the unstructured environment, and it's very fast paced. So I would say some of the things that are really great about scale up, essentially, you wear many, many hats. If you want to think about transitioning in your career to maybe your tech to product, you can do that. There are also not so many layers of process. For example, I was working on a international prep video for Meta at one point, and I had to get involved brand, creative, legal, every single sign off. And it was taking so long to get anything done. Whereas in scale up, you can have the idea, speak to the CEO. Okay, great, let's go. Where are the cameras? I took over the LinkedIn page for Polaroid. I had a little bit of experience in brand, but at a big tech, I never would have been able to do that. And I had full reign of, hey, like, let's start trying this and that, and then featuring the internal employees. And that had a huge spike in a lot of people getting interested in Polaroid as a brand. So I thought, hey, I can also do branding as well as recruiting. So I think going into the scale up space can be super exciting. Promotions also can happen a lot quicker. You can find that you're really, really great at something and also have so much more exposure to C-level, board level, be presenting to the board about something. How exciting is that? Would you do that in big tech? Probably not.
Yeah.
The benefits packages are obviously really, really different. So that's one thing that was quite difficult for me going from huge tech to scale up, that actually the people that would want to work at a scale up, it's much more about the employee value proposition. What can we bring them? What are we building? What's exciting? It's not so much about there you're going to have, hundreds of thousands of stock units that have already IPO'd, and that's already value. So the type of people that are interested in scale up, it's much more around the vision of the company and where do they see it going long term. Other big changes and differences I saw around the interviews. And one learning that I had was when I came into Polaroid, and the first role I worked on was an Android developer role, and I just love tech roles. We ended up hiring an amazing female candidate, the first female on the team, which was great. But when I came in, I was very used to the Meta way of, we do live coding, we do not do take-home tasks, we do the cross-functional interview. And I kind of tried to roll that out just as a trial. At the end, I did have a retrospective with all the candidates that we saw and asked them how they found live coding versus a take-home assignment. And then we had a retro with the team. And actually, as a team, we all decided for them as a business, the take-home assignment did work better. So you've got to realize that what works for big tech may not work for scale
Yeah.
up. So yeah, these are some of the things. Another thing that's quite interesting is in big tech, referrals are huge. Around 30% of the people you hire, you want to get through referral campaigns all the time. But in a scale up, if you get 3 people from the same company in a team of 6, that's actually a problem. So you have to think bigger picture and more strategically around the business, and you will have a much closer relationship with HRBPs if you're in recruiting as well. There may not even be finance comp partners. You may work with the HRBP, which is what I did at Polaroid, really closely with all throughout the process. So there's big differences. I would say that people who come from maybe historical banking or insurance, where you know what's going on for the next year, that would be quite a hard transition because at a scale up, things can pivot, move very, very quickly. So you need to be comfortable with that unstructured environment. But I think it's a good challenge for yourself. And I highly recommend
And you learn a lot, right? I mean, in this
it.
journey. Yeah.
Right,
And
exactly.
yeah, as Uplift, we work also with the startup companies and helping them to find the right leadership talent. And almost all of our startup clients, they mentioned that they like to see ideal candidates with the experience of that global tech company, then a startup. And
Yeah.
then they would like to be the second startup in their profile, in their experience, and they don't want to be the first startup experience after the global tech. However, I think it's also important from candidate perspective, maybe to polish their profile a little bit if they have built something from scratch in that global tech as well, right? Because there are lots of projects, initiatives happening as well in those giant companies. So maybe the person really builds something from scratch and build a system, processes, etc. Could be important to highlight that in the profile to increase the chance to be selected, right?
100%. All their own personal projects. I know a software engineer
Personal projects, yeah. Yeah.
at Polaroid, he was annoyed with some sort of banking app. So he just created his own. Created his
Yeah.
own, and it started getting
Why
users,
not?
and it was on Apple. And now, if he was big tech, rather he was scale up anyway, but if he was big tech, he could show this to a scale up and say, hey, I've done this, I've launched my own brand. Look how many reviews it's got. So yeah, doing things like that. If you are interested in getting into scale up and you are getting resistance from companies because of your big tech experience, then you can do these sorts of things to
Yeah,
get more
exactly.
traction.
Great. So maybe there are some new joiners to the webinar. I just like to highlight that we have just started with Annelisa. So if you have any questions, please write them on the chat. So we'll definitely check that. So I like to also jump into the second topic, Annelisa. So with your wealth of experience in global talent acquisition in different regions, Europe, LATAM, Asia Pac, in the US. So what unique candidate search strategies have you developed? Because one size doesn't fit all, right, in all markets. So what are the differences across regions and markets based on your experience?
There are big differences. One key difference I would just call out straight away. For example, we had an office in Shanghai, Polaroid. LinkedIn is blocked.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's super difficult if you want to source yourself for candidates there. So you have to have local knowledge of local job boards. Ideally, you want to have Chinese language speaking skills as well. So sometimes I would
Yeah.
say strategy wise, if you are recruiting out of China, use an agency. That is one thing, because otherwise you will spend so much time. I think
Because
other
candidates also need to connect to VPN, right? To be able to connect to LinkedIn. So there's even a little bit barriers or extra effort that they need to make to be online there.
Yeah, and it can get completely blocked at times, and it's actually illegal for them to be connecting to these VPNs, and they can get in trouble. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I would say in that just with China specifically, easier to use someone local on the ground, someone that understands all the nuances.
Yeah.
I would say LATAM, something to bear in mind there if you ever started recruiting in Brazil, is in Brazil, and I looked at some connectivity roles in Brazil. So whilst going through the process, if you have standout candidates, you must get them background checked. before the offer.
Oh,
You
yeah.
cannot offer a candidate without the background check being approved. Background checks, as everyone knows, they're our worst nightmare. They take sometimes 6 weeks. So really start looking at that in the beginning of the process. When I recruited for roles in Brazil, I met with the recruiters on the ground there and found out all of those nuances, all of that information as to how to approach that with candidates. It was very normal there to do, and just culturally, like that's just a thing in Brazil.
Yeah.
But just highly recommend anyone recruiting in regions they have not done before, meet with people on the ground. If there are no recruiters there, just meet with someone that is a local that will be able to give you information. Like in the US, the H-1B visa process, for example, at Amazon, we used to do this. It happens once a year. It's a lottery. You have 30% chance of getting a visa. It's super difficult. And you have to be very clear with candidates if you are going to relocate them with that H-1B process. Fingers crossed they get picked, that they may not get picked, and where else can we offer them? So those are the things I would mention. Another one in the US, if you're hiring candidates for the US, you can get candidates from Canada and you can also get them from Mexico. I would say a huge hotbed of amazing technical talent is in Mexico. When I started recruiting roles in the US at Meta, a whole heap of recruiting and sourcing had been done in US candidates centric, essentially. Over and over again, I would look on FBR, ATS, people would have 5 messages and they're not responding. Okay, so I wanted to do something different, looked into Mexico, great communicators, super friendly, did great in the XFN interviews, lots of female candidates there within tech. So if looking in the US and you're like, oh, I've exhausted everywhere, look at Mexico. Really great talent there, I would
Yeah,
say.
that's a kind of hidden gem that we need to consider,
Really,
right? So also, I would like
really.
to ask to participants if you face any challenge in specific country, because just put them on the chat. Let's see which countries you have the most challenge. And also, how do you experience in the LATAM hiring? Is it also challenging for you? I mean, Mexico, we said, it's a relatively easier, I guess, to attract the IT talent, but how is the overall experience?
So in Brazil specifically, I market mapped Brazil when I had to work a role there. I'd never had any experience of it, so I just spoke to employees in Brazil and asked them, where is the best talent? I would look and CV scrape essentially where all our top hires had come from and source that way. It's also really great looking into meetup groups, who attends those meetup groups within the tech space, for example, in those local areas. Who are the hosts? Can we go and have one of our someone who works for us go and speak there and attract candidates through networking that way? In Mexico specifically, that was kind of different because it was for the US, but Brazil, it was for Brazil. So it was just market map, find out about the legalities, and then go forward that way.
Yeah, exactly. And especially, I also see that, for example, when we consider Europe in the hiring process, do you also face challenge like in Central Europe market, like Germany, France, Netherlands? How is your experience in those markets? I mean, we see the challenge as we see that it's quite much saturated markets,
Yeah.
but like, how is your experience?
I would say that there's some real differences, especially with German and Dutch candidates. So if you look at German and Dutch candidates, a lot of them actually do masters. In the UK, it's not as normal to always do a master's. Like you don't have to do that. Whereas in those 2 countries specifically, people will do masters, they will do internships. Some of them don't actually come out of education until they're like 29 years old. So you really need to bear that in mind when recruiting for those kind of countries. Germany, I would say, is a really tricky one, especially if you're at a big tech like Meta. Like I really struggled with candidates there, and you've got to really look at the country and what's interesting for people in that country. So automotive in Germany is where people are excited to be. It's definitely not, from my experience at Meta anyway, it's not big tech. I would say as well, Dutch candidates kind of different and the Dutch culture for work-life balance is very different compared to the UK as well. So one thing I'd really bear in mind when having interviewers that may not be from the location that you are looking for candidates, really give them an education piece on what to expect with candidates from there. The biggest example I have for this is when I was living and working in Singapore and we had US interviewers. There was a big collide on the way they come across in interviews, their motivations, the way they would speak. The way that they would maybe talk about certain situations is very different to the way a US candidate would. So US candidates can be very extroverted and excited, whereas candidates in Singapore would be kind of more studious maybe in the way they come
Yeah.
across. Maybe they don't sound as excited about the role. So we had to do a lot of education with the US interviewers alongside some of the hiring managers in Singapore and let them know what to expect culturally. And just because someone they're not an extrovert, jazz hands, it doesn't mean they're not interested in the role. It's just a different way of communicating, and this is what to expect when you're interviewing these candidates. After we did sessions like this, it really improved our pass-through rate.
Such an important initiative, right? To
So
increase
important.
awareness of hiring managers or any interviewers from different functions.
100%. And you've also got to make hiring managers in the US who will be managing APAC teams. Again, what are the cultural nuances? What can they expect? A colleague of mine and me actually did a session on giving feedback in APAC, because this was something that APAC candidates don't feel very confident on. Giving constructive feedback to their managers, it's much more, you are given your task, you do them. If you don't like it, you won't say anything. If there's something bothering you, you typically won't say anything. So we did sessions on why is feedback important? Why is constructive feedback important? What does it do? What does it do for your manager? How will it help you in your career moving forward? Because if you don't say anything and you're uncomfortable or you're not happy, nothing's going to change. So we did a lot of work on that kind of project space in the APAC region, because that's
Yeah, exactly. And I think these initiatives I see quite valuable to improve the candidate experience as well, because at the end, I mean, for some of the businesses, candidates are also customers, especially if they are working B2C.
yeah,
So you risk your business development efforts as well at some point, because when they have a negative experience, of course, they talk to minimum 10 people right around them. I think there was a statistics about that. Some negative feedback is spread it so fast, but the positive feedback is just maybe close friends, family members only. So therefore, we need to be extra cautious how we manage talent acquisition and candidate experience in this process. I mean, especially global level,
yeah,
right? Yeah, and you mentioned about the US a little bit, and it's also, I think there are some different dynamics in the US as well, in terms of there are laws prohibiting employers from asking about the candidate's base salary, right? I mean, like in states, New York, California, Massachusetts. So as a global recruiter, I mean, you have to know about these nuances in labor law and regulations.
exactly. Another thing to be aware of if you are just about to start recruiting is, if you are going to post a job in New York, you must, or you can get a fine. And if you do it 3 times, the fine is absolutely huge. You must post the actual salary range. Can be really difficult actually, because then every candidate sees the top of the range and that's what they want. And then how are you, if they get under-leveled also, it's very, very difficult. But it's the law in the US in certain states. So that's something you need to be hyper aware of legally. And you're right, you cannot ask what a candidate is on. I don't think anyway it should be that relevant. I think it should be, what do they want?
Yeah, exactly.
Always.
Yeah,
What do they want? I've
much
given,
safer.
seen people, yeah, like in the UK, it's not illegal to ask that, and I've given people pay increases of like 80K on the base. Like, it shouldn't matter. There's a banding for a reason, and you shouldn't be trying to undercut candidates just because of what they're currently on. So for me, it's always, what are you looking for, and what does that look like? What would a great offer look like? And then
Yeah,
trying as hard as you can to get that. And if, for example, they're looking for something that's way out of your band, just let them know. Be honest. This is the max we can pay. If you are not interested, that's absolutely fine. We don't want to waste your time. So being really transparent on the salaries you can offer, especially in the US, I think is very important.
it
Like,
is.
it just builds trust with the candidate, and it means your closing ratio is going to be high because they know
Yeah.
what to.
Yeah, and I mean, there is also opposite practices that I have seen in Asian countries. They even ask for the last pay slip,
They do.
like they want to see it, see, like physically. I mean, digitally. So they
Yeah.
ask candidates to get it. I mean, it also seems like as a kind of common practice in some of the Asian markets, right?
Correct. Yeah. I actually had a friend when I was living in Singapore who kind of inflated his salary a bit, which is probably an English thing to do. Uh,
Yeah.
and then the company asked for the proof, and he kind of sent it to them, and he got his offer pulled. So that is something to bear in mind if you are looking for a job in Singapore. Now, big tech companies will not do this. Typically, it will more likely be the local companies, but
Yeah.
yes, legally they can ask for proof, and it will be proof of your RSUs. What does that vesting schedule look like? Your bonus, what was the
The
payout? When was
details.
that?
Yes.
And your base salary, and when's your promo cycle? So they will want an intense amount of information from you. And legally in Asia, yeah, you have to send it, or you may get your offer pulled.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, we have to be careful, like how we manage these processes in different countries.
Yes.
So okay, so let's move to the next topic, a little bit about the trends and technologies in the talent acquisition. So I mean, there are lots of technologies as well, like the AI, and there are different trends. So let's talk a little bit about that, or other like a remote work trend still there, although there are many companies are asking employees to come back 3 or 4 days in a week, or even full time. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about that part.
Yeah, so on the tooling side, I have a big recommendation for people if they do want to try out an AI tool. So there's a company called MetaView that I became aware of in Amsterdam. They are an AI note-taking tool. So essentially, you just add them to your debrief, to your kickoff meeting, to your screens, to your interviewers' screens, and it will take notes for you. So you do not have to frantically type, and then after your interview, you have to spell check everything if you're sending it to a leader and grammatically look. It saves hours and hours and hours of your time. What it does is it will take the whole transcript for you, and then it will send you 5 minutes after your interview or whatever the meeting has finished, bullet pointed, all of the key points. And it also has a really cool feature that if you're in a debrief discussing a candidate and someone says, hey, what's the candidate's motivation for joining us at Bumble, for example? You
Mm-hmm.
can type in, because maybe you've forgotten, and you've got so many candidates on the go, you can type in motivation. Every single part of an interview where the candidates mention their motivation, it will come up, and you can give in real time, okay, their motivation is this. So that's a tool that I love. We're trialing it at
Yeah,
Bumble at the moment. The whole TA team, very excited about it.
oh, great suggestion. Yeah,
I'm hoping that we
exactly.
roll it out.
Yeah, and I definitely, and we use also another similar tool. I forget the name, Otto or something like that. We can maybe write on the chat, and yours as well. I think it's quite similar tools, and it really helps as well. I mean, to save time and increase the efficiency, because as you said, you are dealing with many different candidates, different jobs, different hiring managers. So it really helps to be more efficient. And as well as, I guess, AI is used also in screening candidates. We use also AI Recruiter, which screens different sources of internet and brings a long list of candidates to us, which is quite cool. While we are still searching candidates on LinkedIn, CRM systems, or local job boards, it's an additional data point for you to consider, right?
Mm.
So, and ChatGPT, I guess you use it as well.
Yeah, I do. I think it's really useful for putting your job description in and seeing is it a masculine, feminine, neutral job description.
Oh yeah,
You want to really ensure that you're
good
not
point.
using, these masculine words like super, not super, ninja. I've seen like ninja superstar.
Yeah,
Just and just making sure your job description sounds really good, really snappy, not too many must-haves, because there's so much intel out there around,
yeah.
women will only apply for jobs typically if they have 80 to 90% of the skills on the job description. So do not do that. Make sure that your must-haves are the key ones, and you have nice to haves that are ones that are not so important.
Yeah, exactly. And these job descriptions sometimes can be so boring. Yeah, I really like to get help from ChatGPT and get some creativity, because
Yeah,
there's always like those bullet points. I think from candidates' perspective, I mean, it's also boring. I mean, people sometimes don't read all before they decide to apply, right? They just apply.
exactly.
So yeah, I think we need some innovation there.
Yeah, just to
Yeah.
make your job description stand out 100%. I think something that's useful is putting your entire interview process so people know what
Oh
to
yeah,
expect.
that's really good point. Yeah. Hmm.
If you make people do a presentation, for example, which puts so many people off, list it, because you're being honest about your process. Let them know who are the people you're going to speak to. You don't want to have their full names, but the first names. It makes you kind of like it feels a little bit more personable, and then okay, this process should take 3 weeks, 4 weeks max. I've got enough time for this. But if it's a 10-stage interview process, you're not going to apply for that.
No.
Maybe
Yeah.
you will if you love a long interview process.
Exactly. So regarding the remote work, I mean, there are some of our clients. They don't have any offices. They are working globally, remote setup, and they come up with some of the required skill set, experience, and budget. Of course, they're based on their budget, and as well as they say, find me this person between this time zone. And of course they don't want to work very like a big time zone difference as well with those people, but there are trends like that as well in the market, of course, depending on the industry as well. I mean, if you are a production plant, I mean, you can't really hire remote people to work with you. But how do you see in your industry or the industries that you work so far? I mean, is that trend helping also to attract different talent?
100%. I think this actual decrease in remote talent is, uh, I mean, I love being able to work remotely most of the time, but the decrease in it and the 5 days in the office for Amazon and now more and more companies, Meta
Mhm.
is 3 days mandatory as well. My previous company is 3 days mandatory. It does mean that you're really sacrificing a lot of people, like a lot of women and men cannot or will not work 5 days a week in the office anymore. I think there was a stat that in the UK it was either 30 or 40% of people would not consider a job if it's 5 days in the office. So that's almost half of your candidate pool.
Indeed, yeah.
And you're not trusting employees. I think Spotify released an article recently. They're not our children. We trust people to do their jobs, and their applicants, if you look at the trends, they've gone up. So if you do offer remote or just an adult way of working, like at Bumble, I typically go into the office 1 day a week. Is there any point me going into the office, sitting in a meeting room, doing calls back to back to back to back? Not
Yeah.
really. And actually, I find when I do work from home, sometimes I'll work through my lunch because I'm just so involved in work. So it doesn't mean you're going to be working less hours. Sometimes it will be more, but it's just so much easier for you without this commute. So I would say it seems to definitely be declining, unfortunately, but there are some awesome companies. My friend Marie works in one in Amsterdam where they let you work remotely for 3 months of the year, which is
Mhm.
amazing. So you could work from Spain, Bali, wherever, do your work. As long as your work is going well and you're performing, you're allowed to do
Yeah.
that. If your company offers 3 months remote working from anywhere in the world, that is really, really unique and it will attract so many candidates. So
Yeah.
when thinking about your benefits, especially startup scale up, if your benefits are not that great, but you offer that, you're going to have a ton of people interested.
Yeah, yeah, and you can tap into different talent pools, not only in your specific country where the founders or C levels are, but you can also find people within your budget from different markets. So it
And
opens
increase
up,
your diversity pool as well.
yeah,
If you
diversity.
like, there's so many hotbeds of talent around the world. Nigeria, a lot of tech talent there. Like, you can really, really change the outlook of your business by doing these remote working hubs. For me, like, 1 day a week in the office is great because then I get to see the team.
Of
We can
course,
do
yeah.
sourceathons, for example. I think sourceathons are better in person. There's certain things that are much better in person. I prefer to do a one-to-one in person. I don't know why, I just prefer it. So I think it's a happy medium for me personally, but yeah, companies should definitely consider this hybrid slash remote model for sure, because it's
Yeah.
so many uplifts and positives, and you can look into the data of productivity as well.
Yeah, totally. And of course, after you hire remote people, there's also another challenge starting, like how to manage people remotely with high engagement. And because it is not like in the you are like all in the office, right? So you don't see each other, you don't have coffee chats, and so. But maybe we can discuss that in another webinar. That's a standalone topic.
Yeah, yeah. Coffee chats, just on that one point, you
Yeah,
can still have coffee chats, you just have them virtually. So
yeah.
one thing
You
that
need to
Bumble has,
schedule it, right? You need to put some attention and effort on it.
yeah, at Bumble we have something where you once a week you have a coffee chat with someone random in a different business area, rather than just your business area. It means you get to learn more about the different business units, what's going on in different people's
Mhm.
areas, make some connections that way. So you definitely can still have coffee chats
Yes.
or water chats, just remotely. So there's ways around it for sure.
Yeah, that's great. So I can't believe like we came and at the end of the episode. So, but thanks a lot, Annelisa, for all the insights. And of course, we will be posting this as well on LinkedIn. And for the other people who can would like to hear, of course, more, they can hear. And let me see if there is any chat. Sorry, there's one comment and question. From Boglarcom, shares her comments. Salary information is helpful for new joiners. On the other hand, can drive to jealousy or competition. Transparency is crucial from my point of view, she said.
100% agreed.
Such an important topic.
Agreed. You get more buy-in from candidates if you're transparent from the beginning. They know
Yeah,
they trust you, so it's
yeah,
always
yeah, exactly.
incredibly transparent.
And Shara asked about the tool that you mentioned, Annelisa. I'll put that in the chat box.
Yeah,
So definitely.
MetaView it's called, and you can at the moment. I'm not promising it because it's not my company, but at the moment you can get a 2-week free trial where you just test the tool. It's very easy. You can also integrate it with your ATS. So we're using
Yeah,
Lever at Bumble, and you can after you've done the call, you can put your feedback in, send it straight to Lever as interview feedback. So it's got that integration there. So highly recommend. But if you
yeah,
reach out to them, you can definitely get that. As far as I know, 2-week free trial.
perfect. Yeah. So it's called MetaView.
Interview.
Let me, yeah, put on the chat. The other one that I mentioned, which is quite similar, Otter AI. I found that too. So let me put some examples here for people. Okay.
It just means that you can pay attention during the chat, right, and not take notes and really
Yeah.
be a lot more just there.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
interview just gives you a much better point of view. So for me, these sorts of tools being created are just amazing.
Yeah,
Takes
indeed. Yeah,
my breath.
exactly. Okay, yeah, that's cool. And so I see there's no other questions from the chat, but thanks a lot, Annalisa. It was a pleasure meeting you and talking about all this stuff. It's so great stuff.
Thank you. It's very fun, and cheers to everyone for joining.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.